A wealthy but arrogant man mistreats his secretary so much that he ends up falling in love with her. But what she does leaves him shocked. In a grand conference room at the headquarters of Wharton Industries, the air is thick with tension. The air dispute has been dragging on for months, with each meeting bringing new rounds of conflicts, especially between Tyler Wharton and his sister, Lauren. Tyler, with his calculated gaze and firm stance, is seen as the natural successor to the empire built by their parents. However, Lauren, with her sharp ambition and manipulative charm, constantly questions his leadership. "So, Tyler," she says, raising her eyebrows, "don't you think you're being a bit hasty with all these changes? After all, the company needs someone who really understands the big picture, someone with a more flexible vision." Tyler remains unfazed. "Lauren, what Wharton Industries needs now is stability and strategic planning. Flexibility has nothing to do with hesitation." He turns to the rest of the team, trying to ignore his sister's provocation, but the truth is that family pressure has tormented him for years. In the same room, Sarah, a young employee in the finance department, watches the heated exchange between the two heirs with keen interest. Sarah is dedicated, talented, and ambitious. She works hard, always hoping for a promotion that could mean not just professional growth, but also a better life for her family. However, her relationship with Tyler is, at best, difficult. He seems to notice every tiny flaw in her work, which frustrates her deeply because she strives to be recognized for her effort, not criticized for details. As the meeting adjourns, Tyler stops Sarah in the hallway. "Sarah, the report you sent yesterday had some errors," he says in a cold tone. "Accuracy is crucial. Please review every point before submitting anything again." Sarah maintains her composure, but her voice sounds firmer than expected. "I did review it, Mr. Wharton. Maybe there was a misunderstanding, but it wasn't due to a lack of care." Tyler frowns, surprised by her direct response, then simply turns away, abruptly ending the conversation. They go their separate ways, but the discomfort lingers. While Tyler is annoyed by her attitude, Sarah feels she is constantly under a critical gaze, as if she'll never be enough. Further down the corridor, Lauren observes everything with a slight smile on her lips. She knows Tyler's weaknesses and sees Sarah as a pawn she can use in her own game. For her, creating instability between Tyler and his team is just the beginning of a much larger strategy. The next morning, Tyler calls an impromptu meeting. He enters with his usual cold and determined demeanor, getting straight to the point. "We need someone precise and committed to audit the farm. There are conflicting reports between production and financial reports, and we need a detailed and accurate analysis. I won't tolerate any more inconsistencies." Tyler's tone was cold and incisive, a clear reminder that he wouldn't forgive mistakes. Sarah barely hesitated. "I can go," she declared firmly, looking directly at Tyler. He raised his gaze, assessing her with an intensity that made her hold her breath for a moment. Tyler stared at her, and for a second, his hardened eyes seemed to soften, almost imperceptibly. "Very well, Sarah. I expect impeccable results." When Sarah left the room, her heart was pounding. She knew this was the opportunity she had longed for, but she couldn't shake an inexplicable unease. On the day of the audit, the heavy clouds in the sky already signaled a storm brewing. Nonetheless, Sarah set off to the company's farm, determined to complete the task. She reviewed data, talked to the local team, photographed reports, and while she worked, focused on every detail. The sound of thunder echoed in the distance, but she only quickened her pace, determined to finish everything that night. If she didn't, she knew Tyler would consider her weak, incapable of handling pressure. Back at headquarters, Tyler is in his office, engrossed in a pile of documents, when his assistant knocks on the door, alarmed. "Mr. Wharton, the storm has worsened. Sarah is still in the field, and there's a risk of flooding in that area." A chill ran down Tyler's spine. He knew the farm's terrain well and understood how dangerous the area could be during a storm. On impulse, he grabbed his coat and car keys. "Cancel my appointments and notify the rescue team," he said quickly, without looking back. His mind was consumed by a sense of urgency he could barely understand. At the farm, Sarah tried to run back to the main barn, but the wind and rain held her back. With her heart racing, she spotted a small cabin nearby and took shelter there, trying to contain her panic. Soaked and trembling, she felt the weight of loneliness in the dark. Every sound seemed more intense, and her fear grew as the storm worsened. Tyler arrived at the farm and found the area deserted. Anxiety gripped his chest as he imagined where Sarah could be. Fighting against the wind and rain, he shouted for her, his voice lost in the howl of the wind. His eyes scanned the area until they spotted the cabin on the hill. He headed there, battling the storm that pulled him back. As he forcefully opened the door, he saw her sitting on the floor, hugging her knees, her eyes wide with fear. When she saw him, Sarah sighed, a mix of relief and disbelief. "Tyler?" she murmured, her voice barely audible. He quickly approached her, kneeling beside her. "What were you thinking, Sarah? Staying here in this situation?" he said, his voice choked with a mix of anger and relief. Sarah looked at him, still breathing hard. "I wanted to finish the audit. I didn't want to fail." Tyler closed his eyes for a moment, trying to process everything. Sarah's dedication was almost insane, but he couldn't ignore the courage she had shown. "I can't believe you risked your life for this," he whispered, his face closer to hers than he realized. Hours passed, and the storm continued. Tyler tried to establish communication, but their cell phones had no signal, and the night inevitably stretched on. The roar of the storm intensified the silence that dominated the cabin. Tyler and Sarah sat side by side, with no words to fill the space between them. Each lightning strike lit up Sarah's face, showing her tired and tense expression, and Tyler realized he had never seen her so close, so vulnerable. He took a deep breath, fighting the uncomfortable feeling expanding in his chest. Why had he risked so much for someone with whom he had always maintained a strictly professional and often tense relationship? He didn't have a clear answer, but he knew he couldn't stay away. "I didn't think you'd come all the way here," murmured Sarah, looking at him with surprise, her eyes expressing a mix of gratitude and distrust. "I couldn't leave you alone," he replied, trying to keep a firm tone. But her vulnerability disarmed him. "You're too stubborn, Sarah. Haven't you ever heard of prudence?" She managed a tired smile, unable to avoid a sarcastic reply. "And you're too controlling to let anyone do the job their way." Tyler suppressed a smile, but his face soon turned serious again. "That's no excuse to put yourself in danger. You could have gotten really hurt." Silence returned, but now it carried a different tension, almost a strange familiarity. Sarah adjusted the blanket around her, trying to fend off the cold that penetrated to her bones, and looked away. She was fighting the uncomfortable feeling of dependence, something she had always avoided. Being there, so close to Tyler, feeling his almost protective presence, made her uneasy. Later, when the rain briefly calmed, Tyler broke the silence. He began talking about the weight of his responsibilities, how he had always felt pressured to be perfect, to lead the company with the same firmness as his father. "Sometimes, I feel like every mistake is a threat to his memory," he confessed, his tone low and almost imperceptible. Sarah looked at him in surprise. She had never imagined Tyler as someone who carried personal burdens. He had always seemed so untouchable, so cold and distant. "I understand," she murmured, choosing her words carefully. "I grew up needing to prove my worth at every moment, but maybe in a different way. I don't have a legacy to honor, but everything I do is for my family, for a future that's safer for them." He watched her in silence, finally understanding the intensity with which Sarah approached her work. Every argument, every tense exchange of words at the office made sense now. It was as if both were always at war, not just with each other, but with their own expectations. The forced proximity due to the storm enveloped them in an involuntary but undeniable intimacy. Sitting next to Sarah, Tyler began to see something beyond the criticisms and demands he had always exchanged with her. In Sarah, he saw a determination that mirrored his own, and it sparked a curiosity he couldn't suppress. Sarah's eyes fell on the clock, showing there were still hours until dawn. Without realizing it, they leaned closer to each other, seeking some comfort. Minutes passed until Sarah, in a low voice, asked something she never had the courage to say before. "Why do you always criticize me so much, Tyler?" He was silent for a moment, surprised by her frankness, and thought about his response. "I see potential in you," he confessed, as if sharing a well-kept secret. "I see that you never settle for less than you can achieve, but it bothers me that you don't know when to stop and take care of yourself." Sometimes I push you to see how far you can go." Sarah looked away, reflecting on his answer. She never imagined that his criticisms were a reflection of the recognition he had for her work. "Maybe I try so hard because I feel it's never enough," she responded, still hesitant. "You push me all the time, and I think it's made me even more obsessed with perfection." Tyler smiled, a rare and gentle smile, almost imperceptible. "Well, maybe I have to admit I'm partly responsible for that." The sentence hung in the air, and they both felt the weight of an understanding they had never reached before. The storm roared again outside, but inside the cabin, the atmosphere was different. Tyler and Sarah finally relaxed and in an honest exchange allowed themselves a pause in the constant game of distrust. Without words, they knew something had changed between them, an unexpected connection born amidst a turbulent night. As dawn began to peek through the window, they both knew reality awaited them outside, and the safe, private space of the cabin would soon cease to exist. But for now, they allowed themselves to be there, side by side, sharing something beyond words. The first rays of sun pierced through the cabin's small window, and for a moment, the world seemed suspended. Tyler and Sarah felt the weight of the previous hours, the storm that had forced them into unexpected closeness. When they opened the door and the morning light illuminated their faces, a silent connection seemed to pass between them. Both knew, but neither dared to put it into words. That night had changed something forever. Back at Wharton Industries headquarters, Sarah and Tyler tried to resume the frantic pace of work, but it was impossible to ignore what had happened. When their eyes met in the hallway or in the meeting room, there was something more, an indescribable, almost forbidden tension. Sarah, who had always valued her professionalism, found herself captivated by a new and intense expectation, while Tyler, always so restrained, realized that a simple exchange of glances could unsettle him. Days later, Tyler gave in to the impulse he had been repressing. At the end of a meeting, while the other executives left, he stayed behind waiting for Sarah to notice. When she looked his way, he held her gaze, letting the unspoken question hang in the air. "Would you like to have a coffee with me?" The question came out low, almost a whisper, but filled with intensity. Sarah hesitated for a second, surprised. "Coffee? For what reason?" she asked, but there was a slight smile on her lips. "Let's just say we need to clear some things up." Tyler held her gaze, a mysterious glint in his eyes, and she knew it went beyond any work-related conversation. The coffee shop was discreet, far from the headquarters, and they sat in a secluded corner. Tyler was more tense than he had imagined, but at the same time felt compelled to speak what he had been holding back. "I never thanked you for that night," he began, his voice soft, almost hesitant. "For enduring all that, you're stronger than I thought." Sarah smiled, a smile that mixed vulnerability and strength. "That night was intense, for both of us." She looked away, and Tyler realized that, for the first time, she was showing a weakness, a part of her she rarely let show. The coffee they had ordered grew cold on the table, but neither of them seemed to notice. The words were few, but each one carried a weight that drew them closer. Tyler felt something slipping out of his control, a need to know her more deeply, to break through the barriers they had both built over the years. With each meeting, something within Tyler gave way. Sarah, on the other hand, also allowed herself to get involved, even though she tried to resist. But when he invited her to dinner, she accepted before she even realized what she was doing, as if the answer had already been engraved in her mind. That night, in a cozy restaurant far from the city center, Tyler wasn't the strict boss she knew, but someone different. He shared stories of his childhood, his struggles to meet his family's expectations, and the pressures he carried in silence. "I've always been trained to be in control," he said, his voice raw with honesty. "But for the first time, I'm not sure I want that." Sarah looked at him with a tenderness she didn't know she had. "Tyler, you don't have to be that perfect version everyone expects. Sometimes, strength comes from allowing yourself to make mistakes, to let go." The silence that followed was so intense she could hear his breathing. When she reached out and touched his hand on the table, it was as if something snapped in the air around them. He intertwined his fingers with hers, and neither had the courage to let go. From that night on, Their relationship evolved with an intensity they both tried to hide, but it was impossible to deny. In the office hallways, the subtle touch of their hands as they passed each other, the long, secret glances, all became part of a silent language. Meetings now had an added significance, a nervousness that wasn't there before. Every word exchanged had a double meaning. Every movement seemed choreographed so the outside world wouldn't notice. The fleeting glances, the hidden smiles, the way he watched her when she was focused, all made the atmosphere between them charged with an electricity no one else noticed. In that shared private space, they were building something precious, fragile, yet unbreakable. They knew the risks, the danger of exposing what they had, but every moment was worth the sacrifice. Tyler, who had always been rigid and calculating, now allowed himself to be vulnerable, to laugh more, to smile more, while Sarah allowed herself to relax, something she never thought possible. But both were aware of their surroundings, the risks, the curious glances, and the ever-present shadow of Lauren. Still, the possibility of a scandal, of being discovered, seemed a small price to pay for the intensity of what they were experiencing. On a particularly intense night, as the city slept and the lights at Wharton Industries dimmed, Tyler stopped Sarah at the end of the hallway. Both hurried, aware of the danger of being seen, but in an impulsive move, he pulled her close, enveloping her in a kiss loaded with everything they had held back for weeks. It was hurried, yes, but with an intensity neither had experienced before. "This is insane," Sarah murmured, pulling away, but with a radiant smile. "I know," Tyler whispered back, his face too close to hide any emotion. "But I don't want to stop." In that moment, they realized nothing could separate them. For them, the romance was a fervently kept secret, but it became the axis around which their world revolved. Every encounter was now a risk, an adventure, a way to live intensely, a feeling that grew more powerful with each passing day, despite the imminent consequences. The following days were filled with an almost unbearable tension. Tyler and Sarah were now two conspirators, accomplices in a romance that existed in the shadows and whispers within the walls of Wharton Industries. Every minute away from him felt like an eternity to Sarah, and every look from her disarmed him. But they knew that as long as the relationship was secret, they needed to keep control, even though everything around them seemed about to explode. It was impossible to ignore the change he brought in her. Sarah, once solely focused on work, now had her thoughts invaded by Tyler's face, his rare and intense smiles, the way he looked at her as if no one else in the world existed. In moments of distraction, she found herself touching her wrist, where he had held her hand the last time they met. At the same time, she knew she was treading on dangerous ground. One misstep, and everything they had could collapse. The secret meetings were risky, but each one was worth it. That night, after the last employees had left the building, Tyler found her in her office, where they had agreed to meet. He entered silently, but his gaze revealed how much he longed for that moment. "You know this is crazy, right?" he murmured, his voice low, filled with a mix of apprehension and desire. Sarah smiled, even though she knew he was right. "And since when has reason stopped us from doing anything?" Before she could finish speaking, he enveloped her in an intense, almost desperate embrace. He knew the risk increased every day, but he also knew he could no longer stay away from her. The office, once a cold and impersonal place, now felt intimate, almost secret, with their presence hidden in the shadows. While they held on to each other, they knew it was only a matter of time before someone noticed. And that made the moment even more precious. They didn't know how much time they had left. It was a dance between control and chaos, between desire and the need to protect themselves. For Tyler, who had always controlled every aspect of his life, Sarah was a breath of freedom, making him feel more alive than ever. A few days later, fate brought them together again in an important meeting. It was impossible to hide the change in the way they looked at each other, but both tried to maintain professionalism with all their might. However, something felt different. Tyler noticed, from the glances and whispers, that his sister Lauren was beginning to watch them with suspicion, attentive to details. Tyler felt a chill down his spine, realizing that if anyone could use their relationship to cause harm, it was Lauren. After the meeting, as all the executives left, Tyler and Sarah crossed paths in the hallway. The tension in their eyes was palpable, and they knew things were getting riskier every day. He took her by the arm and pulled her into a secluded corner. "Lauren is starting to suspect," he whispered, his voice deep and worried. "We need to be even more discreet." Sarah swallowed hard. She knew that anything involving Lauren meant trouble. "I trust you, Tyler," she said softly, and he realized those words meant more than anything else she had ever said. However, reality began to press on them more and more. As the days passed, the tension increased, and they knew the secret was becoming harder to keep. Tyler and Sarah now lived as if each minute together could be their last, and that only intensified the feeling they had for each other. Each secret meeting, each furtive touch, each hurried kiss in the silence of the office was filled with a contained passion that threatened to explode at any moment. One night, after another long day, Tyler finally suggested something they had both avoided discussing. "We need to figure out how to handle Lauren," he said, his expression serious. "If she finds out, this could be the end. She wouldn't hesitate to use our relationship to disqualify me and take you down." Sarah felt the impact of his words, but her response was firm. "I don't care about the consequences, Tyler. I'd rather take that risk than lose what we have." She held his hand, a touch that conveyed all the certainty that she was willing to face any obstacle by his side. They began to live each moment with intensity, as if time was against them. They knew that with each secret meeting, with each affectionate gesture, the danger increased, but the feeling they shared was stronger than any fear. And that kept them strong, even when the world around them seemed about to collapse. However, neither of them knew that Lauren was already one step ahead, alert to the signs that something was happening. And for her, every little detail was an opportunity to expose what they wanted to keep hidden. The inevitable happened faster than Tyler and Sarah expected. On a rainy morning, the atmosphere at Wharton Industries felt heavy, and Sarah's intuition was on high alert. She had noticed small details in recent days: prolonged glances, whispers among colleagues, and an unusual interest from Lauren, who seemed to be discreetly following her. Something was different. However, nothing prepared her for what was to come. While organizing some documents, the phone on her desk rang. Lauren's cold voice came from the other end. "Sarah, I'd like you to come to my office to discuss some important matters." Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. She was familiar enough with the way Lauren spoke to recognize that something was off. Upon arriving at the office, Lauren watched her with an enigmatic smile, her hands clasped under her chin. "Please sit down," Lauren said, in a tone that seemed too gentle to be genuine. The room was suffocatingly silent. Sarah could feel Lauren's intense gaze on her, almost as if she was studying her every move. Lauren paused for a long time, letting the suspense build before speaking. "You seem to have a rather close relationship with my brother," she said, with false casualness. Sarah felt her heart race, but she kept her face impassive. "What do you mean by that, Lauren?" Lauren leaned forward, the smile disappearing from her face. "Let's save time and be frank, Sarah. I know about you and Tyler. I know you meet after hours, and honestly, it's pathetic to see you think this would go unnoticed." Lauren's words hit like a punch. Sarah felt the weight of what was at stake and fought to keep her composure. "My relationship with Tyler doesn't interfere with our work," she responded, trying to keep her voice steady. "Everything I do here is professional." Lauren let out a cold laugh. "Professional? Please spare me the moralistic speech. You know as well as I do that this is all just a game of interests. And you know, sooner or later, all games end. The only difference is who comes out on top." Lauren stood up and walked to the window, her gaze fixed on the horizon. "I have enough evidence to expose both of you to the company board. You know what that means, right? Not just the loss of your job, but also Tyler's credibility." She turned, her gaze icy. "And I won't hesitate to use it all against you." Lauren's threat was clear and direct. Sarah felt a wave of despair and anger, but she also knew that giving in to the provocation would only make things worse. "Why are you doing this, Lauren?" she asked, her tone exhausted. "This has nothing to do with you." Lauren laughed again, this time with intense bitterness. "Oh, Sarah, don't be naive. This has always been about me. Wharton Industries should be mine, and I never allowed Tyler to take that right from me. If I have to destroy what you have to prove that, I will do it gladly." Sarah left the office feeling defeated but determined. She knew the situation was delicate and that she needed to talk to Tyler immediately. She found him in the hallway and silently led him to an empty room. "Tyler, we need to talk. Lauren, she knows everything." The words came out urgently, her eyes pleading for him to understand the gravity of the situation. Tyler felt the ground disappear beneath his feet. He knew Lauren would play dirty, but he hadn't imagined she would go this far. And she threatened? Sarah nodded, and Tyler closed his eyes for a moment, absorbing the magnitude of the problem. "She has evidence, Tyler. She's going to take this to the board to destroy us." Tyler's expression hardened, but he took her hands firmly. "Sarah, I won't let Lauren manipulate us. What we have is too important to be thrown away because of her ambitions." She squeezed his hand, feeling the warmth and confidence he exuded, but the fear still consumed her. "And if she really exposes everything, Tyler, what will that do to your position, to your career?" He gently held her face, maintaining firm eye contact. "I would rather lose Wharton Industries than lose you, Sarah." Tyler's words brought a mix of comfort and worry. They were together in this fight, but they knew Lauren wouldn't back down. They needed a plan. Tyler knew he had to confront his sister head-on, without hiding or letting her control them with her threats. In the days that followed, Tyler and Sarah prepared for what was to come. They decided they wouldn't give in to fear or Lauren's pressures. When the board met to discuss the company's future, Tyler would be ready to face her, willing to do whatever it took. However, when the day of the meeting arrived, a tense atmosphere dominated the office. The board members gathered in the large room, while Lauren watched them with a discreet, confident smile. Sure, her secret weapon was infallible. But before she could begin, Tyler took the floor. "Ladies and gentlemen, it's true that my relationship with Sarah has crossed professional boundaries. However, I believe you should know that this relationship does not affect my commitment to Wharton Industries." The board fell silent, surprised by his direct confession. Lauren, on the other hand, was stunned, unable to hide her shock. Tyler maintained a confident, steady gaze, not yielding an inch. "I know many here might question my integrity, but I also know that I've always conducted my business with transparency. And as long as my position as a leader of this company is an important asset to Wharton Industries, I won't allow anyone to use my personal life as a weapon to undermine our stability." Lauren, frustrated, tried to intervene, but her posture revealed desperation. Her attempt at manipulation had failed, and Tyler had turned the tables. The board, respecting Tyler's frankness, turned against her, realizing her actions were putting the company at risk. Lauren's threat was dismantled. In that moment, Sarah knew their bond was strong enough to face any storm. Tyler looked at her from across the room, and she realized that finally they could live in peace. Despite facing Lauren together, the battle was far from over. In the days that followed, a series of rumors began spreading throughout Wharton Industries. Lauren, though weakened, continued to manipulate the situation, spreading insinuations to turn the team and the board against Tyler and Sarah. Every hallway encounter was now filled with judgmental glances, and whispers emerged in the silence as they passed by. The weight of the intrigues affected them both, but for Sarah, the situation was becoming unbearable. Every time she was called into meetings, she felt the disapproving stares of her colleagues and wondered if she was seen only as the employee dating the boss. She knew this could destroy her reputation, and that to many, her talent and dedication were being overshadowed. "Sarah," Tyler began one night as they discussed the situation, "I know how much all this is weighing on you. If you want to step away for a while, if you feel you need that space, I'll understand." She looked at him, surprised by the suggestion but also feeling the care he put into every word. "And let Lauren win? Let the board think I'm just your shadow? I can't accept that, Tyler. I've fought too hard to be where I am." Tyler watched her, admiring the determination in her eyes, but also fearing what this situation was doing to both of them. "I just don't want this to hurt you, Sarah. I know my family, and especially Lauren, are capable of things we can't predict." That night, Sarah decided she needed to do something more. She wouldn't step away, wouldn't give up everything she had built at Wharton Industries. She knew that to win this battle, she needed to show everyone, the board, the employees, and Lauren, who she really was. And for that, she would have to stand her ground and confront Lauren directly. The next morning, Sarah called a meeting with the board. With her heart racing, she walked into the conference room where all the directors were present, including Lauren. The atmosphere was tense, and silence fell as Sarah took her place in front of everyone. "Gentlemen, I asked to be here today because I need to make something very clear," she began, her voice firm despite the pressure weighing on her. "My relationship with Tyler has never influenced, and will never influence, my dedication to the work I do at this company. I've worked hard to reach the position I hold today, and I will not allow rumors and manipulations to undermine the value of what I've built." Lauren interrupted, a sarcastic smile on her face. "Do you think your word alone is enough to convince everyone, Sarah? Frankly, it seems all too convenient." Sarah faced her, determined. "Lauren, I know your attempt to destabilize Tyler and me is just a way to take control, but I won't back down, and I won't let you put the company's interests at risk to achieve your personal plans." Sarah's confidence was impactful. The directors watched her in silence, impressed by her courage. It was clear she was not there just to defend her relationship, but also to protect the integrity of the company. At the end of the meeting, one of the directors spoke, turning to Lauren. "I think it's time we reevaluate the intentions here. Tyler and Sarah have been clear and transparent, but your actions, Lauren, have raised doubts about the true interest of the Wharton family in the company's well-being." Lauren realized the board was against her, but tried to maintain her composure. For the first time, she saw her plans crumble. Tyler, who had watched everything in silence, felt a wave of pride and relief. He knew that Sarah had faced one of her greatest fears by confronting the board, and that in that moment, she had proven her worth to everyone. Later, Tyler found her in the company hallways. He didn't say anything, just held her hands, and in the silence of that moment, they both knew the fight was finally over. Sarah had shown she was unbeatable, and together, they had faced the worst. "I'm proud of you," Tyler whispered, his eyes filled with emotion. "Not just for today, but for everything you represent." Sarah looked at him with a relieved smile. "I couldn't have done it without you, but now I know I can handle anything." They left together that night, certain that after all they had faced, the bond they shared was stronger than ever. Sarah knew that with Tyler by her side, she could face any storm, even those that seemed insurmountable. Apparently, the battle against Lauren was over, but Sarah and Tyler knew the atmosphere at Wharton Industries was still tense. The rumors Lauren had spread continued to circulate, and even after the board acknowledged Sarah's integrity, the environment remained filled with suspicion. It was as if the ghost of everything they had gone through still haunted the hallways. One afternoon, an unexpected confrontation intensified the tension. Sarah was called to a meeting with Richard Callahan, a respected and influential veteran of the finance team and a longtime ally of the Wharton family. Always cordial, Richard was seen as a mentor by the younger employees, and Sarah considered him one of the few she could trust for support. But upon entering the room, she felt something different in his gaze, a hardness she had never seen before. "Sarah, thank you for coming," he began, his voice low and controlled. He closed the door behind her and gestured to a chair in front of him. Sarah noticed he maintained a rigid posture, his eyes fixed on her, analyzing as if trying to decipher something. "Of course, Richard," Sarah replied, staying calm despite her growing discomfort. "How can I help?" He took a deep breath and started without preamble. "I've always trusted your professionalism, Sarah, and I admire your work. But since the incident with Lauren, it seems you and Tyler have become a distraction for everyone here." That accusation caught Sarah by surprise. "A distraction? Richard, what exactly do you mean by that?" Richard looked at her with a calculated gaze. "You must realize that being in a relationship with the CEO is a risk. Not just for you, but for the whole company. Employees are questioning if favoritism might be affecting Tyler's decisions. He's been more impulsive, and that raises doubts about the influence you have over him." Sarah felt her blood boil. She knew her relationship with Tyler had drawn attention, But hearing that it was considered a risk made her feel diminished and undervalued. And hearing it from Richard, someone she respected, was even more painful. "With all due respect, Richard," Sarah replied, her tone firm. "Nothing that Tyler or I do here is driven by favoritism or emotion. I've worked hard to be where I am, and so has he. Our relationship doesn't interfere with our responsibilities." But Richard didn't seem convinced. "You may believe that, Sarah, but people talk. Lauren might be gone, but the damage she caused remains. Other executives still question your influence over Tyler and his ability to make objective decisions while involved with a subordinate. I've known him since he was a child, and I've never seen him so vulnerable. I need to protect Warden Industries from risks, and I can't ignore that your relationship with Tyler has been a factor of instability." Richard's words were like a blow. His cold sincerity hit her in a way she hadn't expected. Even after all she had proven, she realized she was still seen as a threat to the environment. The insinuation that Tyler was being influenced by her deeply irritated her. "If you think I'm just a dangerous influence on Tyler, then you don't know me, Richard," she retorted, lifting her chin with determination. "I've always kept my personal interests separate from my responsibilities. If people question my value because of my relationship, then maybe they've never truly valued the work I've done here." Her tone surprised Richard, but he didn't back down. "I understand your point of view, but you need to understand mine. My duty is to protect this company, and if at any time I feel that your relationship puts Warden Industries at risk, I won't hesitate to act." Sarah stared at him, feeling the tension rise, but maintained a firm gaze. She knew Richard wasn't an enemy, but she also realized he was a fierce protector of the company's legacy and that ultimately he would do whatever he deemed necessary to preserve its stability, even if it meant pushing her away. After the meeting, Sarah left with tense shoulders, but determined. Tyler was in his office, waiting for her to arrive for an important meeting, but when he saw her enter, he immediately noticed the distress on her face. "What happened?" He approached, holding her hand, but she looked away, taking a deep breath to compose herself. "Richard basically made it clear that he sees me as a threat to the company's stability," she said, feeling the anger resurface. "He believes that as long as we're together, your judgment might be compromised, Tyler, and that I might be affecting your focus and the trust of the employees." Tyler felt a wave of frustration. He knew Lauren's resistance had caused damage, but hearing that even Richard, a trusted ally, was turning against them was a hard blow. "I can't believe this. Richard has always supported our decisions," he said, his face tense. "But he's not immune to rumors and suspicions, Tyler. And if people keep questioning my presence here, it could compromise everything we've worked to build," she responded, determined. "Maybe I need to consider my position in the company." Tyler held her by the shoulders, his eyes locked on hers. "Sarah, no, you've worked hard to get where you are. I won't let unfounded prejudice destroy that. I'll talk to Richard. He needs to know that my loyalty to the company and to you are not in conflict." Sarah looked at him, moved by his determination, but reality still haunted her. "Tyler, it's a risk. I don't want my presence to become a threat to your leadership. Maybe we should reconsider our positions for the sake of the company." But Tyler was resolute. He squeezed her hand firmly, as if that touch was a vow of confidence. "I'm not willing to lose what we have. If Richard can't see what we've achieved together, then he also needs to be convinced." The next morning, Tyler and Sarah confronted Richard again. Tyler was clear and direct, defending Sarah and reaffirming that their relationship wouldn't affect his judgment. With her support, he laid out his expansion plan for Warden Industries, detailing each part to show that his leadership was solid and unbiased. The presentation convinced Richard, who began to see their combined strength as an advantage, not a weakness. He finally congratulated them on their resilience and determination, offering his unconditional support. The gesture was a relief, and Tyler and Sarah knew they had overcome another hurdle. After this confrontation, Tyler and Sarah were closer than ever, and the bonds they built within the company started to inspire their colleagues, who finally saw them as fair and balanced leaders. Months later, Warden Industries flourished under renewed and strong leadership. Tyler and Sarah, alongside a team that now saw them as examples of partnership and commitment, managed to transform the company's environment. The respect they had earned through many struggles was now visible every day. What was once distrust and intrigue had turned into support and admiration. Sarah now held a leadership role in the finance department. Her ability to handle complex problems and manage crises had become one of her greatest strengths. Tyler, in turn, had become a more open and approachable figure, which surprised many, especially the older directors. The relationship between them, once viewed with suspicion, now inspired respect. That morning, an important event was scheduled to celebrate the new phase of Wharton Industries. The company's event hall was decorated for an award ceremony where Sarah would be honored for her exceptional contributions during the year. Tyler watched the preparations with a mix of pride and satisfaction. Seeing her name among the nominees reminded him of everything they had overcome together. When Sarah took the stage to receive the award, the room was filled with warm applause. She looked out at the audience, where many of the colleagues who once questioned her now applauded with genuine admiration. Tyler, sitting in the front row, looked at her with a smile that was a mix of pride and affection. It was their moment of recognition and overcoming. "I'd like to thank everyone who supported me," she began, holding the trophy firmly. "Each of us has faced challenges that seemed insurmountable at some point. But by working together, we've proven that any obstacle can be overcome. And for me, Wharton Industries represents more than just a company. It represents a family, a home. And I couldn't be more grateful to be a part of it." The applause filled the room, but none was louder than Tyler's. He knew her words went beyond a simple corporate statement. They had fought side by side, and that award was not just professional recognition, but the culmination of everything they had built together. Later, as the guests were dispersing, Tyler and Sarah found a moment of privacy. They moved to a quieter corner of the hall, where the buzz of their colleagues was just a murmur in the background. "Congratulations, award winner," Tyler said, smiling, his gaze full of admiration. "I knew you could do it." She smiled back, feeling her heart warm. "All of this was possible because we were together. I know we would have had the strength individually, but it was the mutual support that made the difference." He pulled her into a hug, ignoring any curious glances from late colleagues. At that moment, what others thought didn't matter anymore. They had weathered the storms, the intrigues, and the judgments together. Now they were ready to move forward, as partners in both their personal and professional lives. As they pulled away, Tyler looked at her with a twinkle in his eye. "So how about a real celebration? Dinner? And this time, no rush, no hiding. Something special." She laughed, and the sound echoed through the hall. "I'd love that, Mr. Wharton, but this time, dinner's on me." They laughed, relieved and happy, as they headed for the exit together. The struggles they faced hadn't been in vain. Each challenging moment had brought them to this point, and now, with the support of the company, the board, and each other, they were confident they could build something lasting. In the months that followed, Tyler and Sarah watched Wharton Industries grow, thriving under their shared and strong leadership. Lauren had left the company for good, realizing there was no more room for her schemes. Richard, on the other hand, had become one of their biggest allies, and the respect he felt for them was now genuine. For Tyler and Sarah, the journey was just beginning. Each new challenge was an opportunity to strengthen the partnership they had worked so hard to build. And at the end of each day, as they left the company building together, they knew that the love and trust they shared were their greatest achievements. Hand in hand, they said goodbye to Wharton Industries that night, aware that the future awaited, and together they were ready to face anything. What do you think of Tyler and Sarah's story? Leave your opinion in the comments. On a scale of 0 to 10, what rating would you give this story? If you enjoyed it, subscribe to our channel and see you in the next video.